About a week ago, I did a video about how Ron Howard's Cocoon is pretty hard to find these days in any format. It came out on DVD many years ago and had a very brief run on Blu-ray, but it went out of print quite a while back and has never really been issued lately on digital services. You can find it in different region Blu-rays, but even those are kind of hard to find. The movie is not easy at all to watch, all things considered, because, of course, it was an Oscar winner in 1985 and a big hit. And for me, this is a perfect example of why you should always hang on to your physical media, as I'm lucky enough to own the now out-of-print DVD of that movie, and while it's far from an ideal copy, at least something. That got me thinking, what other movies are really hard to find? I opened up the forum on Twitter, and I was shocked by how many prominent films aren't available digitally and have gone out of print on disc, making them all the more precious for collectors. While there are some happy endings, such as Martin Campbell's No Escape, which got a beautiful Blu-ray recently, too many of these films seem to be caught up in some kind of rights limbo or studio apathy. So, here are my 10. We're starting, of course, with Cocoon, the one that started it all. How does a movie that won Don Amici an Oscar and revitalized the careers of Jessica Tandy, Hume Cronin, and the great Wilford Brimley go out of print? This is the movie that made Ron Howard an A-list director, and it was enough of a smash hit that it spawned a pretty crappy sequel, which ironically is very easy to find. What's going on here? It is possible, of course, that Disney is working on a major restoration, but it's been gone for a really long time. Number 2. This is a big one. Strange Days, directed by Catherine Bigelow. This movie never really got that much of a good physical release. It's out on DVD, but it's a terrible non-anamorphic print, which is awful, and is similar to James Cameron's The Abyss, which finally is getting a 4K re-release because of a complicated rights situation between Lightstorm Entertainment and 20th Century Fox. Strange Days is available right now to stream on HBO Max, but apparently it's not actually in the right aspect ratio. It's 178:1, formatted for widescreen TVs, while it was a scope movie. And this is a really terrific film. I mean, it's got Rafe Fiennes, it's got Juliette Lewis, and an amazing badass performance by Angela Bassett. It's really a shame that this one's not out on Blu-ray, because it's kind of a masterpiece and would be a no-brainer for a company like Criterion to pick up. Number 3, here's a really weird one. Showtime, with Eddie Murphy and Robert De Niro. This was just kind of a run-of-the-mill comedy action movie that came out in the early 2000s. Nothing really special about it, but was kind of entertaining and made a little bit of money. I mean, how often do you get to see Robert De Niro and Eddie Murphy together in a film? Strange thing about this one, though, is that while it came out on DVD in a perfectly acceptable anamorphic transfer, they never put it out on Blu-ray. Yes, this one, unlike a lot of other films on the list, you can get digitally pretty easily. You can buy an HD copy on iTunes, and it looks great, but still never came out in HD on physical media, which is awfully strange for a movie that was a sizable success at the box office and has 2 very prominent stars. Number 4 is an extremely strange case, Crossroads, starring Britney Spears. Now, with her memoir being so successful, this would seem like an ideal time to re-release the film, which only ever got a DVD release. It did get a limited re-release in theaters recently, which makes me think that Paramount perhaps is planning a major restoration or re-release of the film on Blu-ray and digital. But it's still really strangely hard to find, considering how big Britney Spears is, and considering that the movie co-stars young Zoe Saldana. Very strange, isn't it? Number 5 is one that comes with a big asterisk. George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead is one of the classic horror movies of all time, and one of the greatest zombie movies ever made. And yes, it's been released and re-released on DVD many times, but in North America, there's no official Blu-ray release. You can get an imported version, which I believe will actually play on Region 1 players, but there's never been a North American Blu-ray version of this movie, or at least there's not one available right now. And you also can't stream it as easily as you can the other Romero Dead movies, like Day of the Dead, and of course Night of the Living Dead. It all has something to do with rights issues, which is kind of sad because it's such a classic touchstone movie. It should be available everywhere, right? Number 6 is one that's really hard to find, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, starring Diane Keaton and a very young Richard Gere. So this is based on a true story, actually, about a teacher that was going around to singles bars and ended up being murdered by one of the people that she hooked up with. This movie was a giant hit in 1977 and helped make Diane Keaton a really big star, and even got a couple of Academy Award nominations. Very strange that it hasn't been released, especially with true crime being such a thing now. And, I think that if it got a big re-release, people would be intrigued by this film. But it's almost impossible to find. It came out on VHS, but was never issued on DVD or Blu-ray, and you can't find it digitally. There are archival copies of the movie out there. I actually saw it on 35mm once here in Quebec at the Cinematheque, but boy, is it ever hard to find. It sometimes shows up on TCM, but there's a weird thing where if you try to set your PVR to tape the movie, due to rights issues, it won't let you do it on some devices, which is very, very frustrating. This is one of the few movies I'm afraid that the only way to see it these days really is to kind of turn to piracy. But if you watch the movie, you'll understand why it's probably not available, because the music licensing for this movie would be a nightmare, because she's going around to discotheques and nightclubs, and it's just hit after hit after hit on the soundtrack, so it would probably cost Paramount Pictures a lot of money to restore the film properly. They should, though, because it's kind of a classic. Number 7 is a movie that would break the heart of one of our favorite writers here at Joe Blow Originals, Jessica Dwyer, who did a great fantasizing of fantasy films based on this film. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Yes, that's right, this kind of dark Disney horror movie that stars Jonathan Pryce as a carnival keeper that grants wishes for the price of a soul is very hard to find. So unlike a lot of other movies on this list, this did come out on both Blu-ray and DVD, and in fact, the Blu-ray release of this wasn't that long ago. It got re-released in a nice-looking Blu-ray about 2 years ago, but it's already out of print, which is a shame because this is kind of a little gem. It's not streaming on Disney Plus either, which isn't much of a surprise because this has always been kind of the black sheep of the Disney films, it seems. But then again, The Black Hole is streaming, and that was kind of a flop, an infamous flop, one might say, although it's very entertaining. Something Wicked This Way Comes is a terrific little horror movie and could probably find a whole new audience were it to get re-released, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see. Number 8 is a very obscure film called The Blood of Heroes, starring Rutger Hauer, Joan Chen, and a really ripped Vincent D'Onofrio. This is kind of a post-apocalyptic action movie in the Mad Max vein that, due to very complicated rights issues, has never gotten a proper DVD or Blu-ray release. There's a bunch of different versions of this movie too. The ending is very strange because it gets cut off in the North American version. So this movie kind of needs a full restoration and probably with multiple cuts because it's just such a mess now, any version of this movie that you try to find, which is too bad because it's kind of a fascinating little movie. You may also know it by the other title, Salute of the Jugger, which makes sense if you've seen the movie. Number 9, another very heartbreaking one. Pretty much all of John Woo's Hong Kong films are very hard to find in North America on DVD and Blu-ray. Yes, you can stream The Killer and Hardboiled, and you can find Blu-ray copies of them pretty reasonably out there. But the issue is the subtitles for this movie are very strangely translated. In fact, they're kind of like dub titles, which is an infamous thing that everybody hates in the foreign film collecting community. But at least you can see them. But Woo's A Better Tomorrow 1 and 2 is really hard to find, as is a movie that he did called Bullet in the Head, which is considered one of his greatest films ever, and stars a very young Tony Leung. These movies are available internationally. You can find them in Hong Kong, but North America, they seem to be caught up in some kind of legal limbo, with Woo himself saying that he really wishes he could restore them with a company like Criterion, but the rights issues are just a nightmare for these. And 10, another one that is very strange that it's not available, The Heartbreak Kid, starring Charles Grodin and Jeannie Berlin. This one is directed by Elaine May, who's become this kind of cult figure on film Twitter because she was one of the few female directors working in the 70s that was making prominent films. Heartbreak Kid was actually a big enough hit that it got remade with Ben Stiller and Malin Ackerman, yet it seems like it's almost impossible to find. It's a bit mean-spirited, but it's a really interesting film with a great Charles Grodin performance, and Jeannie Berlin is terrific in this. So why isn't The Heartbreak Kid available? You'd think that as film snobs out there, we'd all be demanding its release, but alas, the fact is, Elaine May's movie that she did after it, Mickey and Nicky, which vanished for years and years and years and was this little cult item, is so easy to find in Criterion, yet The Heartbreak Kid, which was her biggest hit, almost impossible. Alas, that's only 10 titles, and apparently there's a lot more, so make sure to let us know in the comments below which movies you can't find and seem to be gone forever, because it'd be really interesting to track down some of these and see exactly what is going on and why you can't get these movies. And if you do happen to have decent physical copies of these movies, make sure to hold on to them, because who knows when we'll ever see them in legitimate form again.